coming. The tapestry wasn't mentioned in this update. That's why you've answered a question that I was going to be asking, was who are the two tenants. So I'm just making a point. I realise I sound as if I'm being critical. I promise you I'm not. It's just a case of the council moves so slowly. We need to get this stuff done.
Thank you, Councillor Poppy. I think your point is heard loudly. Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee this year, sadly, but I welcome the opportunity to ask a couple of quick questions, if I may. First of all, can I place on record to Mr Mayhew and Mr Anderson our thanks from myself and Councillor Pounder-Patel for the work that they've been doing. We've received some incredibly good regular feedback, very useful feedback over the last 12 months, and it's really been an assistance when talking to his residents. I'd like to thank you for the work you've done on Poplar Lodge with the gate. That now has deterred the antisocial behaviour that was occurring in the car park, and it's much welcome and far more secure now. I have a couple of questions, really. The first one is, my understanding from residents in the last 3 or 4 weeks was that there was a near miss in the car park at the rear of the lodge, the rear of the main hall, the dining hall. That tends to be because cars are coming in from one entrance, going round at speed and leaving at the other, and both the entrance and exit signs are no longer present on the building. I understand that you may be sectioning off the car park and you may be relabelling it, but can I ask, given that we talk in this report of the handover to tenants for late July, that work on the labelling of the entrance and the exit is done as a priority because of the safety issues arising, particularly with the likelihood, with the fact it's younger children and elderly people who will be using that building. That was my first one. And the second one was, because a lot of the discussion about the use of the building was done in pink, we as ward councillors have respected the confidentiality of it being in pink and have not, I guess it's outed tonight into the public domain, but we would like to engage with our residents, inform them of what's happening, and work with yourself, Chair, and the officers to agree a form of wording that suitably describes the use going forward of the hall so that we can put pay to any rumours that might circulate and clarify to residents what the plan is over the next 1 or 2 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barber. That was quite a structured question, so I'll ask officers to come back to you on offline, but I can very much see the point on communicating needed when it is going to next steps, given situations that you established. So, yes, thank you. Unless officers want to add anything, I think it makes more sense to come back with a bit more detail to Councillor Barber's point. Any other questions on the Chair's report? No? Fantastic. In that case, we move on to item 5, the committee work programme. Report begins on page 17 of the appendix, page 17, and the appendix begins on page 21 of the agenda. Are there any questions on the report? No. In that case, sorry, Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the projects, asset projects and strategy going forward in the reports pack. I had to, being new to your committee, I had to go through your terms of reference of the committee, and I noticed bins are on there. And it's something that Mr. Stuart Anderson will, I'm sure, agree with. The park bins can sometimes become overflowed, particularly Whalley Country Park overflows all the time. And I just wondered if there was a strategy to look at the bins in the park areas, the open spaces, to either get bigger bins or increase the frequency of emptying them. So that was one thing, and the other thing is that I note that there's LDP updates and what have you, but there's not been anything. I'm only starting to learn about the New Towns Task Force and the expressions of interest that were submitted in December, which I believe the Joint Administration signed off. We're only just starting to learn about the New Towns Task Force and the 10,000 additional properties that could be coming to the borough. But there's no sight of that on this programme going forward. I just wondered when we'll get sight of that and learn more about that. Thank you.
Councillor Russell, if that is to come forward, it would come to full council at an appropriate time, but I can guarantee to you that the entrance to that policy was us joining at a policy of Basildon and Thurrock, who were going to submit it anyway, and in more detail, the position will be and will retain that this is an option for us to consider, and I can see no circumstance where Bruntwood Borough Council would be in favour of remaining a part of expression of interest that would not be included in our LDP numbers as well, just to give you that assurance. But that would be a full council item given the scale of it, rather than to this committee, if it were to proceed. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, it's just that because we got the LDP updates and everything else, I thought it's natural that we'd get sight of it before going to full council.
I think that it would be in members' briefings, etc. It would work a la Dunton Hills did, which came straight to full council, but in turn was briefed out to members in advance, and that was over a 3 or 4 year period. And it's the same theory. If it is viable, that's a very big question that we don't know the answer to, and it relies on 2 other authorities as well. And we know that dealing with ourselves is challenging, let alone 2 other authorities at the same time.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it's rather a prickly start to our endeavours throughout the year, but needless, it needed to be mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. I will actually just follow up on the bins point. This committee is responsible for the infrastructure element of the bins, so part of that will be scale, but pickups, collections, etc. remain fully with Clean and Green. And I believe part of their infrastructure assessment, they will be looking at that element as well. That will form part of the community infrastructure project plan, which is noted in there. Admittedly, the start of that will probably be more likely to be on the high streets, but certainly I know Clean and Green will be looking at other elements of that as well, and that will be brought forward as appropriate. Any other questions on the work programme at all? No. Thank you. I will now move the recommendations that are set out on page 17. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, I'm happy to second it.
Thank you. Given we've had questions already, I will move that to now vote on that recommendation set out on page 17 of the agenda. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair.
That's unanimous. Thank you. Item 6 is the management and oversight of Brentwood Policy and Strategy Framework. The report begins on page 25 of the agenda, and Appendix A begins on page 2 of your supplementary agenda packs. Ms Nicholson, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just briefly introduce if that's okay. So the purpose of this report is to support the maintenance and development of the Council's policy and strategy framework. The first part of the report focuses on governance of the policy framework. So it is proposed that at the start of each municipal year, the Council's policy schedule for the forthcoming committee cycle, attached to enclosure A in your supplementary pack, is presented to this committee to facilitate oversight of the policies scheduled for review or development in that municipal year. And then to ensure the policy review and development process can be managed effectively, it is recommended that the delegated responsibility be given to the relevant committees to approve policies as outlined in Appendix A. And you'll note that the schedule sets out which committees will consider which policies. Subject to agreement this evening, those policies will be added to committee work programmes going forward. And then the second part of the report provides an update on the development of the strategy framework, which has experienced some slippage. This will be addressed in the coming weeks and reported to the next committee meeting. And just for some assurance, the strategies are being prepared and taken forward. And for example, the economic growth strategy is going to the Finance and Resources Committee next week. The work needs to be completed. It involves putting together an overview of what strategies are still active, which ones require review or need to be revoked, and what new strategies are required to come forward. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms Nicholson. I will now move the recommendations. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second that. I reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak on this item?
I'm good too, thanks.
In that case, I will move quickly on to vote on the recommendation set out on page 26 of the agenda. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, members. Thank you, Ms Nicholson. Item number 7 is the Local Development Plan Working Group 2025-26. The report begins on page 31 of the agenda. Mr Quilter, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. So the report recommends the approval of the establishment of the Local Development Plan Working Group for the 2025-26 municipal year. The LDP Working Group, operating under the Assets Project and Strategy Committee, plays a crucial advisory role in the development of the local plan. Comprising 8 elected members from various political groups, the working group ensures transparent, collaborative and informed engagement throughout the plan-making process. Key responsibilities include providing informal feedback on the draft local plan documents, scrutinising the evidence base and consultation outcomes, assessing compliance with statutory requirements, and offering thematic input on critical policies such as housing, employment and environmental protection. The re-establishment of this group is vital for maintaining structured oversight and early member engagement, ultimately supporting the timely and effective progression of our local plan. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr Quilter. I will now move the recommendations on page 31 of the agenda. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second that. Reserve my right to speak. Thanks.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak on this item? Councillor Kendall.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr Quilter. Yeah, just really a question, I suppose, on behalf of residents, because residents are becoming more and more aware of this now, because obviously there's been some publicity about it. And it's just this question of resident awareness of the time frame for the whole process. Yeah, how long is it going to be? How the thing sort of works? Yeah, and the communication strategy, if you like, with residents in terms of keeping them up to date with, if you like, each stage of the process. And appreciate a number of things are up in the air at the moment, but if you can give us any feedback on that, that would be quite useful. Thank you.
Mr Quilter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Kendall, for the question. So, yeah, I mean, the principal document that I would refer to, I appreciate it's probably not the most public-facing document, but the Local Development Scheme timetable is obviously a statutory document that we have to prepare. So that was recently approved earlier this year at this committee. That sets out the key milestones that we need to meet. Obviously, there's effectively a minimum of around 2 consultation stages, so what's referred to as Regulation 18 and Regulation 19. In effect, in sort of common terms, it's around normally issues and options and then preferred optional pre-submission version of the plan that we'll go forward with. So we're, in terms of the timeframes for the next public consultation, it's scheduled for the second quarter of next year. So that's when we'd have the Regulation 18 document. I think we set out that stage it would be a preferred options document, but obviously we need to develop that and work it through the working group in terms of how that's pitched. And then in terms of the following stage, that'll be about a year after that into 2027, similar time frame. So in terms of the process itself, as we know, does take a long time. The previous plan was obviously elongated over a very long period of time, not for our own design, but obviously a number of factors that can impact upon that. So what I would say is that obviously we do have to keep that timetable under constant review, and if there are any significant changes as a result of any other factors, whether that's changing government policy or if there's any sort of local evidence which requires a bit more thought, then there may well be an update to that timetable accordingly. So we are looking obviously over at least 3, maybe not say 4-year period, but a 3-year period probably from the sort of where we are now to actually potential adoption. I won't go into all the other factors. Obviously, the government reform may impact upon that clearly, but we'll need to, as I say, keep a wider view on that as we progress really in terms of any potential impacts. In terms of engagement with the public, again, we have a statutory document we have to prepare, which is called the Statement of Community Involvement. So we have an adopted version of that. I would say that probably does need to be looked at in terms of updating. That obviously sets out really how we as an authority would engage with the legislation and how we would then obviously carry that forward, what we need to do, and additional factors we would incorporate to actually engage with the public. I think on top of that, certainly we'd look at really whether there's some kind of engagement strategy about, again, if there's a need for further, more direct engagement with the public that we could incorporate.
Follow up, Councillor Kendall.
Chair, yeah, it's just really odd probably on that last point. It's just clarification because we're obviously all quite close to this and we have an understanding of it, but from a resident perspective, there's a local development plan that we've got already, then there's this, and it's how the two operate, if you like, yeah, and how it works. And I just think the point, obviously, take the chair's advice as well. At some stage, some sort of public engagement in terms of residents being aware of the process. Those who are interested in it, you know, might be useful. Just an opportunity for people to ask those general questions. How does this work? What happens here, etc.
Mr. Gordon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree. I think that certainly, you know, in the past, obviously, with the previous plan, there were other, whether that's through direct newsletters, obviously there's the Borough Magazine, things like that, that we could actually have that wider audience. We also do advise if anyone wants to be directly contacted by us, we can get them to be registered on our consultation database. So there is also that side of it, but I appreciate it's kind of broader than that in terms of making sure people that may not normally engage in that process, at least they've got a way of understanding what's going on, what we're doing as an authority. So yeah, I think we can, through the working group, certainly that's something we can probably discuss further about the early stages, what that strategy looks like and what we potentially could do, particularly within what resources we've got. But you know, I think there's certainly an important aspect. We want to bring people along with us rather than they're not being informed at the end of the process.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Councillor Poppy.
Thank you, Chair. I think to continue that from exactly Councillor Kendall said some of what I wanted to say was, but I think the problem has been is on the last LDP, or the current LDP, I should say, I suppose. I don't think people got that involved when it was a consultation was there, but it's hit them in between the eyes as these planning permissions have been going in, certainly in my ward. And now that they're all now listening to a new LDP, that they're now getting worried about how many, you know, properties, even though all you've done is call for sites, they're actually seeing those as you're starting building next week. And I think that's part of the problem, and where Councillor Kendall's right is the communication needs to be upped and we need to get somewhere on it. My only question about this the thing with the working group, does it, and it's really to you, Chair, does it really need 8 members? That seems quite a lot to me, but...
Councillor Poppy, is a legitimate question. I think there's an advantage in expanding it in terms of bringing on the independent group, and given where potential sites are, that also makes a lot of sense in that circumstance. Also, as there are no substitutes, it does mean we can meet in a more frequent sense, in that sense, in terms of actually trying to have a working quantum at a regular basis. But it's a legitimate point, and we can review that as we go on with the plan if it is slowing it down, but it's a legitimate point to consider. But we thought it was useful at this stage to increase the participation at this point, and recognising that the working group, while we've been very collaborative and positive, I think, so far in the working group and building it, and I don't think there's been really any partisan elements, as we get more to sites, it's not necessarily partisan, it is walled, it is personal, it is challenging, it is what's right, what's wrong. It's going to be a slightly more difficult process, so more and hopefully cooler heads will be helpful, I think, potentially. But we will see how that works, and if it needs to adapt, we will adapt it as appropriate. And it's also worth reiterating, to Catherine and other points, although we put out the information from the first call of sites, and the call of sites again is now open, there have been absolutely no decisions whatsoever on any of the sites that have been put forward, whether they are favourable, whether they are not, whether they're deliverable, whether they are not, whether they're viable or they're not. And that is the process we will be going through with the working group and report to this committee as appropriate. Councillor Russell.
Thank you.
Councillor.
Oh, sorry.
He doesn't want me to speak. Yeah, I echo the thoughts of Councillor Kendall and Councillor Poppy, and it's really difficult how to communicate that call for sites to residents, you know, because you try and give sound bites that are easy digestible, but then you're not giving the full picture. It opens that Pandora's box, doesn't it? If you give too much information, they're lost. I say we are lost. And if you try and limit that information, then you're not giving the full picture. Apologies, I've not been able to make all the working groups, but I've been able to catch up. And it sounds scary, doesn't it? What, 14,000 homes we're looking at by 2035? But that's, I believe, the Dunton Hills would be included in that amount. Yeah, it's not an addition, is it? And of course, again, you know, I come back to the New Towns Task Force, which I wonder if Jonathan can answer. If you're reading the same document as I am, that would be an additional 10,000 to the 14,000, not as part of it. Just wonder if I could have clarification. Thank you.
Mr. Quilter.
Thank you. Yeah, so in terms of what the, I think obviously when the submissions were originally what the call for evidence was originally set out back in the end of last year by the New Towns Task Force, and it wasn't necessarily clearly set out that position, but I think it's obviously subsequently been clarified by the Deputy Prime Minister around that is the position of government. However, in terms of submissions that have been made, it was on the principle that it would only be acceptable if it was able to be counting towards the local supply in this area. So I think as Councillor Barrett mentioned, obviously any decisions that may be made, obviously we'll need to see as they emerge, and it's understanding that will probably be early next month, as I think that's what they've said. In terms of any announcements, if that was to be the case, that any area was identified in the Brentford Borough, then I think we would obviously then want to see what the parameters of that was before it would be accepted. So there's still a lot more to be looked at, really, and obviously we'll have to wait for those key stages to emerge before we make any views known. So I think, yeah, certainly principle would be we'd expect the local plan to be able to take on board those numbers.
Thank you. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm a member of your committee. Having looked at the various plots that you kindly laid out in the plans, and I know that it doesn't finish, I think, till later to the end of this year for applications to come in. Obviously, a number of parish councils and so forth are all also aware of these particular plots. My question really is, how far down the route of the working group or for council or whatever you can put estimated numbers against those plots? Because at the moment they're just a squiggle on the plans, and when people are looking at them, to be quite honest, they don't know what it represents in numbers, and that is the main questions that we're being asked at the moment. It's all very well having we can say that's a small plot and that's a bigger plot, but I think the earlier we know what the estimated numbers are. I know they won't be the final numbers, but some clue of what those plots represent in numbers of houses and obviously occupants. Thank you.
Mr. Quilter.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Parker. Yeah, so in terms of the process, as you say, we've received the submissions in response to that call for sites consultation that took place last year, and that was the information, obviously, that we've recently published. We have also reopened that process on the principle that we are working towards, this time next year before an actual consultation will take place. So we need to make sure that, we can't prevent sites coming forward. We need to understand what's available ultimately. But all of that process will feed into is the strategic land availability assessment. Sorry for the jargon, but that is a document which is looking at principally what is available in the borough and whether it's achievable, whether it's deliverable, etc. So what was part of that process, we have got the also published alongside that was the finalised assessment methodology, and obviously as part of that process we need to go through and understand firstly what have the landowners promoters submitted, and in some cases they have set out a broad estimate of what could be delivered on those sites, but we need to look at it on a holistic basis across all the sites from our point of view, whether that's actually likely, and also applying assumed densities. So, for example, we wouldn't expect very high densities in very rural areas because that wouldn't necessarily be appropriate, and vice versa in town centre locations you want necessarily to see low density. You want to see the most efficient use of land within reason. I would say that it's really principally about that document, and we'll obviously need to run through that process of assessing those sites. So I would say broadly estimating it probably be towards the start of next year that would probably be something we'd be able to present to the working group, and then obviously we'll decide from that point what the publication of that information, and again the sharing of that information, going back to the earlier points, ensuring that the public are well informed about that so they understand what that status is and what that means in practice. But yeah, I think it's probably looking at probably more those time frames before any numbers are probably associated with those.
Councillor Poppy, another.
Sorry, a question just come into my head as you started talking about density. When you're doing this latest one and the call for sites, and then it gets to the next stage or whatever it is, I mean, on this last LDP, or the current LDP, sorry, when I've been watching some of the planning meetings and stuff like that, you've got areas that have been, you know, planned as being 30 houses, 40 houses, and then suddenly when it comes to planning it's 60, or it's this last one in Priest Lane is 97 on part of it when it was supposed to be for 75. Is there not a way when we do this next LDP we can actually say we're sticking to the number we said, or is that just not out of the question?
Good.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, you can probably guess my answer in terms of it's very difficult for us to specifically say that is the number forevermore, because I think the process we have to go through in terms of a local plan, as with everything we do, it's ultimately to be tested by an inspector for an examination process. And what they're looking for is to confirm that what we've got is a broadly appropriate number. Either we're not overplaying it, trying to assume a site can deliver more than it can actually deliver, or also we're not underplaying it and trying to get more from that. So obviously we need to make sure it's as accurate as possible. We can't sort of pluck figures out of the air. We need to make sure they are based on sort of some kind of rationale, hence why we've got that methodology. And ultimately, with any application, if a site is ultimately allocated as the current LDP, there are sites in that position. It's not purely about the number. It's about the impact of that number. Does that number comply with policy? Does it comply in terms of design? Does it in terms of the impacts on the road network, etc., etc.? They all need to be dealt with, obviously, in terms of the officer's consideration. Is that development appropriate? So we can't purely, for example, refuse an application just because it's a different number. It's got to be based on the reasons of the impact of that number. So they may well put those applications in, but there may be reasons for, in some situations, to refuse it if that was the case. But ultimately, the flip side to that, they could easily be approved as well if that was deemed to be acceptable. And obviously, all the statutory consultancy input into that as well. So, like I say, we do need to make sure they are sort of based in reality, those numbers, and we do need to make sure that they're ultimately standing up to scrutiny. But it doesn't necessarily mean that is absolutely fixed just purely because it is that number. I do understand, obviously, from the public perspective, they want that certainty because it provides a bit more reassurance. But obviously, that's what our job is really, is to make sure it is as accurate as we can make it. But there is a lot of factors that could change that position in time. But yeah, we'll make sure that obviously there's as thorough assessment as we can possibly do at this stage.
Thank you, Mr. Quilter, and Councillor Poppy, for your satisfaction. That's the wrong word. I can't think of the right word at the moment. That this has appeared at the working group, and it was raised by members across parties. Actually, that the challenge is, and it's appeared that HPO3, our density policy, seemed to be much better drafted than our policy, our residential policies in that sense. And it's a lesson for us in the next plan that you can't almost have wish numbers. If you think it should be lower or different to that density, you have to properly evidence that and consider it. It's not just something that and actually that may in some cases mean we opened up a bit more of the green belt than we possibly needed to because we weren't putting the right density in at different places. So actually we need to consider this much more carefully and go into a more, an element of pragmatism when opening up the green belt. The density that's sustainable, not the density that we'd like. And that's a difficult decision. But that in turn, this isn't an easy process. But we have to be prepared to make that decision because it is for the greater good, I think, and that's been identified in the current plan. Councillor Poppy.
But it's amazing that none of the ones that I've seen go through the thing have ever been a lower number than we said. I mean, and it just seems that the developers are pushing us to say we want to put 40 houses where we've said there'd be 30 and, so on and so forth. Sorry, I
think there's also the argument that I don't think we have any of the residential sites, and it's got to correct me, that where we have the density is above HPO3. We only have sites that are below HPO3, so we haven't actually said any can be higher density than normal. We've only said those that could be lower, and that was a choice for us. But you can understand why it's been made with the politics and the challenges of a local plan, but the legacy we've now found, we didn't have a new local plan for so long, that the legacy of a local plan is longer, as difficult as it is. The 5 years up to it are painful, the 5 years after it are more painful. It's and then we're back into it, so it's a constant cycle of pain. I've just sold that very well to everyone. Are there any other questions or comments? No. In that case, I will move now vote on the recommendation on page 31 of the agenda. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, members. Item number 8 is the Corporate Compliance Quarterly Update. The report begins on page 45 of the agenda. Mr. Anderson, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. So, yes, and thank you, members. So before you is the quarterly update for compliance on the corporate estate. Mr. Mayhew is going to give a full rundown shortly on the dashboard, just to bring you up to speed on where we are. Just a couple of things. So under electrical safety 2.3 on page 48, just to expand slightly and give some context. So where we talk about sites, the first site is referring to Hutton Poplars Lodge, and obviously any works will be undertaken there when the building is brought back into use. And site 4 is Hutton Poplars Hall. So again, that's just explaining that the fixed wire test works will be carried out or are being carried out as we speak, whilst the building is having more extensive works undertaken on it. I'll hand over to Mr. Mayhew. Afterwards, happy to take any questions.
Mr. Mayhew, for new members of this committee, this is the point where Mr. Mayhew presents and we all get to be mean to him for a period of up to 10 minutes. Or more. Mr. Mayhew. There was a slight fear I'd gone too far then, and suddenly it appeared in my head.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This evening's dashboard for compliance is up to the 6th of June 2025. Water hygiene. There's been no change in this area. All properties currently have water hygiene risk assessments in place, having been completed between 2019 and 2022, with actions arising being progressed and monitored. These are scheduled to be completed again in the 2025-26 municipal year, with any remedials coming from these risk assessments being programmed in accordingly once all the fire risk assessment remedials are complete. LOLA, which is the lifting operations and lifting equipment regulations, again no change in this area. Currently all scheduled servicing visits have been completed, along with the statutory inspections by the councils and insurers on our working lifts. Fire risk assessments. All properties have now had their 2024 fire risk assessments carried out on them. This has highlighted 112 remedial actions that require further works. This includes 27 high priority actions, 84 medium priority actions. Sorry, you've got an incorrect figure, 89, previously given on the report in front of you. Apologies for that. And there's 1 low priority action. 15 actions have currently been closed out, 3 being high, 11 being medium and 1 low, and this remains unchanged from the last report. 24 actions are currently being progressed with officers, of which 12 actions have been completed in that the actions have been progressed as far as they can be by officers. Orders have been placed with contractors to implement the works, but we won't close the actions until the installation has happened, and we are monitoring and chasing contractors as required. These 12 actions amount to 10 high and 2 medium. A further 2 actions are currently being worked on by contractors on site, and these 2 actions are high. There are 17 actions that are in relation to a property occupied by others, a meeting of which has not yet taken place due to diary conflicts, and this will be undertaken when our fire engineer is back from leave. So the current status as of the 6th of June, which is highlighted on the graph there are 22 high actions outstanding, 74 medium and 1 low action. Just in relation to fire, just a bit of information item really, in relation to fire extinguishers. We're currently having our annual servicing and checks carried out. From July 2025, foam extinguishers that contain the chemical PFOA will be banned. so they will need to be replaced with either water extinguishers or fluorine-free foam extinguishers, depending on the location they're being used. Furthermore, any foam fire extinguishers that contain the chemical PFAS are to be banned in 5 years' time. We don't believe that our current foam extinguishers contain either of these, but it's being checked while they're being serviced, and if needed, they're being replaced. Again, with PFAS, if we have any, we will make sure they are swapped out by the banned date. Asbestos. Asbestos management currently stands at 100%, with management re-inspections having been completed on all properties, together with all recommended remedial works. EICR, Electrical Inspection Condition Reports. Of the 18 managed sites that require an EICR, 15 sites now hold satisfactory EICR certification, with 3 sites currently highlighted as unsatisfactory. This is an increase from 11 sites in the previous quarter that held satisfactory EICR certification. The first site has got 14 C2s and 2 C3s. This is currently unoccupied with no works currently planned, as the actions will form part of bringing their building back into use. Site number 2 had 8 C2s, 6 C3s and a further investigation. Works have been completed. This site is now satisfactory. The third EICR has been completed and is satisfactory. 24 C3s were identified and a quotation has been requested for review. The fourth site had 13 C2s, 3 C3s and 6 further investigations. The order for these items has been placed and are being completed as part of a building refurb upgrade, which is currently underway and due for completion by the end of July. The fifth site has 6 C2s, 4 C3s and a further investigation. The survey has been completed, the remedials have been quoted for and we're currently reviewing options. The sixth site had 12 C2s and 3 C3s. Works have been completed. This site is now satisfactory. So to summarise the EICRs, we have 3 remaining sites with unsatisfactory status, 1 currently unoccupied with no works currently planned, as the actions will form part of bringing the building back into use, so this will remain until this time. 1 site is currently being completed as part of a building refurb upgrade, which is currently underway, and we would expect these to all be completed by the end of July. And the third site has been completed and remedials quoted. We're currently reviewing the options. Landlords' gas safety responsibilities. Gas compliance of all directly managed properties currently stands at 88.9%, with all properties having had gas safety inspections undertaken and satisfactory certification being, with 1 location following a site condition report being completed. We are currently reviewing options as to the best way to action this, as site visit is being arranged with our contractor to cost options. Chair, that concludes the compliance update. Nothing further to add, but I am happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Poppy.
Paul, thanks very much. This is really good, and this is so helpful when we get this every time. The only thing I just want to ask on, you've got on the fire safety, you've got 22 still outstanding of a high value. Obviously, I don't really know what that means, and I don't really know exactly how dangerous that seems. Does that mean that I'm at risk if I walk into the town hall or if I walk into the Brentwood Centre? I don't really know exactly what high means in terms of how dangerous is it. So I just want a little bit of, what am I looking, what's the word I'm looking for? A little bit of help to make sure I'm safe. Yeah, I want to feel safe while I'm sitting here.
High, medium and lows are classified by our fire risk assessor, who goes out and looks at all our properties. High are those actions that we need to look at first that carry the higher risk, and so in the RAG system, red, amber, green. We are working on all the higher actions first, but within the higher actions there's nothing in there that is at the point where we need to shut a building or it's dangerous. It's just in the RAG system, it's high and needs to be actioned. So we're addressing them first, which is why they're coming down quicker than the others. So once we've done the highs, well then some mediums are being done because they're easy to action. So it seems silly not to do them, but we are concentrating on the highs. And so they're coming down quite quickly, which is good news.
Mr. Anderson, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just to back up a point Mr. Mayhew said, and just to reassure members as well, although we have high risk actions, that does not mean our buildings are not safe to be occupied. If they weren't safe to be occupied, then we would have had effectively a closure notice issued to us by a fire risk assessor, because she has an obligation and a duty to do so. So just to be clear, the buildings are safe to use, they are safe for the public to use, and they are safe for our staff to use. It's just a terminology for the actions in terms of grading them of a priority of the sequence we need to be doing them in.
Hopefully that provides some reassurance, Councillor Poppy. Councillor Kendall.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Paul and Stuart, for the presentation. Just on page 49, 2.7 Lola, the Nightingale Centre lifts. I understand they've been out of action for a while. I just wondered what the latest was in terms of what was happening there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Kendall. So we are now looking to progress works to replace those lifts. We are working with our housing colleagues on replacing the lifts at the multi-storey car park as part of a large procurement exercise, and we'll be looking at the lifts at the Nightingale Centre as a separate standalone item. Internally, we've identified a project management resource that we can use to actually progress that, and in the coming weeks we'll be looking to pick that up with that resource and look to progress.
Just any idea when that might happen, that might be replaced?
That will probably depend more so on the lead time of when lifts or whatever manufacturer is awarded the contract in terms of their lead time for install, but I'm happy to come back offline once we know that.
Yeah, the representative said we'll give you some reassurance once the order's been confirmed. Councillor Lewis.
Paul and Stuart, thank you very much for your explanation, very helpful. I particularly like the pie charts and bar charts because it's visually helpful rather than necessarily words on the page which can fly over the top. So my question was actually about 2.6 asbestos management, where I can clearly see here 100%. What does that actually mean? I'm aware of, for example, the council owns garages where there's asbestos. There's at least one building, if I could remember what it was, I would tell you, but I can't, which is council owned, which has asbestos and so on. So what does it actually mean by asbestos management currently stands at 100%?
Thank you for your question. This is in relation to our corporate property portfolio, so the garage sites don't fall under this committee. They'll, I believe, come under the housing committee. So this is just the properties that we look after on the commercial property portfolio. Under the asbestos management regulations, we need, where there are sites that are identified that have asbestos on, they have to be inspected annually to make sure there's been no deterioration in the asbestos or any remedial works are required. So each year, all of the sites that have had asbestos in, that we haven't yet removed them from, will be inspected. We get a report from that, and then we get a list of remedial actions that may or may not be undertaken. So if they suggest something needs to be done, we get it done, which is why we don't have any remedial actions anymore. If there's asbestos, as long as it's not touched and it's not disturbed, it's deemed to be safe. So we have a professional go out once a year, carry out the asbestos management survey, and then act on any recommendations that are given to us.
That answer your question?
Thank you, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chinnery.
Well, thank you, Chair. I have a question on the fire risk assessment actions. Firstly, when it comes to these high-risk kind of remedial actions that need to take place, what is? Can you give a couple of examples of what they are, so we understand kind of? I know buildings are safe, but what that is and how it's kind of identified. And then how does having 22 incomplete high-risk actions still needing to take place, how does that compare to previous years? Thank you.
I can do the first bit and I give the second bit to Mr. Anderson. So, for example, on one of the fire risk assessments, so I'll use the cemeteries as an example, it was highlighted when the fire risk assessment was undertaken that there wasn't actually a fire assembly point within the cemetery for the purposes of fire evacuation. So that was deemed a high risk. The probability of there being a fire in the cemetery is quite low with the buildings that are there, but the assessor quite rightly identified that as a high risk. So actually, I've got 3 high risk actions because I don't have a sign inside the chapel, I don't have a sign where the fire assembly point is, and I don't have a map with it on. So actually I've got 3 high risks because I don't have a fire assembly point sign up. So, and that's on 2 cemeteries. There's 6 high priority actions there, and that actually forms one of the 12 that we're currently working on, and that the maps have been drawn, the fire assembly points have been determined. We're just actually waiting for the sign manufacturer to make the signs. Once they're installed, that will knock 10 actions off. So it is a high-risk action, because obviously if there's an evacuation, you need to know where the fire assembly point is. But sort of holistically, in the grand scheme of things, it is a high risk because of what it is, but it's no risk to anyone in that regard, because it's a sign rather than the building being on fire or something like that. In relation to how it compares to previous years, Mr. Anderson, if you would, please.
So we are working towards improving the compliance of our corporate estate, and fire risk was one of the first areas we started with. So the fire risk assessments, as Mr. Mayhew said, were undertaken in 2024, and we are now working to complete those. So we don't really have historical records as to where we were 5 years ago, because we hadn't undertaken fire risk assessments. So we are very much trying to be a progressive step in actually reducing the risks and managing those risks as we go. And just to back up what Mr. Mayhew was saying there, and again, to reassure, the word high risk, high priority can sometimes get taken out of context. So yeah, Mr. Mayhew's quite right. But to give an idea of the variety, it could be, as Mr. Mayhew said, a sign, or it could be something like the work that's being undertaken as we speak in the multi-storey car park to replace every single door with new fire doors, which is over £100,000 worth of work. So it can vary dramatically from fire compartmentalisation, fire stopping in ceilings, or where there are wall penetrations, or it might just be that fire extinguisher hasn't been serviced and needs picking up. So it does vary, but again, the buildings are safe to be occupied.
Thank you. On to a question, Councillor Chinnery.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. And once again, I have no further questions, unless anyone wants to raise anything. Just to thank you both, Mr. Anderson and Mr. Anderson and Mr. Mayhew. For some reason, we confused with Councillor Chinnery there, Mr. Mayhew. I can see the similarities. But this is again an example of actually, it's very positive that we have this report, and to Councillor Chinnery's point, we've only had these reports now for circa 18 months. So it's positive to see actions being made and actually the assessments being done. And it's, I think this was an item and a concept brought forward by the officers for us to challenge them on something that was previously hidden. So I think we should actually thank the officers in that circumstance as well, because it's a good thing that we know about it, because this was effectively for us an unknown, and the officers could get away with it. Not that they would, but actually they've brought this forward and they've challenged themselves in a positive fashion. And I think that's a very good thing for us all to see and acknowledge. Thank you, Mr. Mayhew, if you can return to your seat. I do now have to do, because there is a recommendation on the report, I move the recommendation on the report, which effectively is to note the report on page 45 of the agenda. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second that, thank you.
I will now move straight to the vote. All those in favour of noting the report? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, members. Oh, okay. Item number 9. Is the Strategic Asset Management and Regeneration Working Group. The report begins on page 53 of the agenda. Mrs. Barnes, is there anything you'd like to add?
Nothing for me to add, but I'll hand over to Andy Beer, who will introduce the report.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was distracted. I was like, oh, no, sorry, apologies, no, so I'll take it, thank you. Thank you, members. So the purpose of establishing the Strategic Asset Management and Regeneration Working Group is to kind of focus on the oversight and strategic monitoring of the capital programme that we have coming forward, and also the next agenda item, which is Andy Beer's item, is the asset management strategy and framework, and with that there is some clear actions from it. So the report recommends a working group of 3, and those members have been included in the recommendation. We envisage that the working group will support the formal decisions that would still come to committee for approval. So the working group has no decision-making powers, but they support the committee in order to make the decisions that we need to come forward, making sure that all the actions are aligning with the corporate plan and the ambitions of the corporate plan. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now move the recommendations as set out on page 53 of the agenda. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second that. I'll reserve my right to speak.
Is there anyone who'd like to speak on this item? Councillor Kendall.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a quick question. Obviously, got no problem at all with the recommendation, fully support it. Just a question of, with there only being 3 members compared to the other one being 8 members, if one of you aren't available, are you allowed to have a substitute? What's the process? Thank you.
There are substitutes allowed in this working group, yes. However, I think the purpose of 3 is the ability to move at pace and a personal responsibility for the respective leads of each party who are on this committee to actually report back to their group and collaborate as much as possible, given the future of asset management and asset regeneration is important to all of us and is hopefully not a partisan item, but it gives some level of accountability and responsibility and some clear direction for officers as well. That is the intent. Are there any other comments or questions? No. In that case, we will, Councillor Cloak, we now move to the vote on this item, on the recommendation set out on page 53 of the agenda. All those in favour?
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. That's agreed unanimously. Item 10 is the Asset Management Strategy and Framework 2025-28. Report begins on page 59 of the agenda. Mr. Beer, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. And yes, this is my item. Just before I do, I talk through a bit of the report. There's a couple of updates that I just want to bring to the committee's attention, which has been highlighted through various rereads and various people reading the document. The report makes reference to the 18-month action plan, but then refers to the dates of that 18 months as the June 2025 to December 2027. Those eagle-eyed would have spotted that the actual 18 months is June 2025 to December 2026. So I was getting a bit ahead of myself, so apologies for that. So reassure members that it is an 18-month plan and those dates will be amended accordingly. And also I've been brought to my attention that on the appendix, which is the list of assets, there are a couple of typos in the with respect to the wards, and also there are a couple of assets which are in the wrong ward. I think it's 2 of those. So again, apologies for those, and they will be corrected. However, having said that, so this asset management strategy and the framework has been the culmination of many months' work, where we've been developing and documenting the principles specific to good asset management, but also around the council's portfolio. The development strategy has been informed by the Task and Finish Group, which got set up last year. I'd like to thank the members that were part of that and have contributed to the development of the strategy. The Task and Finish Group have met on several occasions and have had sight of various elements of the report as it is and as it has emerged, and that's been very helpful. And also, just want to point out that the principles which are in section 4 of the report did come to members in March, so they have already been agreed. So that's something that I just wanted to say. So the actual strategy and framework document itself comprises of a number of sections, which I'll just very briefly go through. So sections 1 to 3 are sort of generic asset management items, so the purpose for holding land and property, and also sections on what kind of good asset management represents. So that kind of is a scene set up for the wider strategy. Section 4, as I said, is the council's principles that have previously been brought to members, and again they set out the specific principles this council has adopted around good asset management. Section 5 is the actual land and property portfolio. As I've mentioned in previous reports, we've grouped the assets into categories, partly for ease of just having it as one large portfolio, and also there are certain groups of properties which fit within kind of categories that will have a similar plan kind of going forward. So we've grouped them and under section 5.4 of the report, and there is within the strategy there is a specific section on each of those asset categories which just describes that in a bit more detail. Section 6 is regarding the housing revenue account and really draws the link between the general fund assets and the HRA assets, and whilst housing assets will have their own business plans and asset management plans, it was important that we acknowledge the combined asset portfolio and set out how there are plans obviously to work together so we can maximise the benefit that both of those portfolios bring to the council. And section 7, which is probably the most important, is the action plan, the priority action plan. So that links the principles in section 4 to specific actions over the 18-month period, June 2025 to December 2026, and sets out 17 actions regarding that set out what we plan to do. And they've been sort of purposely divided into areas that look at the asset management service. So that's about the team, the information, the data, having our assets captured on geographical information layer. So that's about how we as a team and a service manage those assets, and there are actions which directly link to the portfolio themselves. So various reviews, so we can produce specific asset management plans related to those assets. So the strategy and framework is not designed to have the answer to all of those individual assets, but I think it does set out a direction of travel and a journey to improve the outcomes and outputs for both the service and the assets themselves. And I've said in the report, it moves us to a data-driven, evidence-led approach to asset management. And I'm happy to take any questions related to the strategy.
Thank you, Mr. Beer. I will now move the recommendations on the report as amended. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second that. I'll reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Now, with the debate, before we begin the debate, I would like to thank Mr. Beer for his work on this project. That's been borderline a fair amount of his life since he's joined Brentwood Borough Council, so I'm sure he'd be delighted with it. And also to thank my fellow working group committee members, Councillor Plain, who's not here, and Councillor Parker. We've had some very positive and productive meetings, I think, and suggestions have been included throughout from the officers and taken in the right way. So thank you for that. First off, I have Councillor Poppy.
You just took the words out of my mouth, to be honest. I was going to, I've got no questions at all. I just wanted to thank Andy for the work and the team that's been done on here. It's been a while coming, and but this is fabulous, and it's so well put together, and there's so much information there. It's absolutely brilliant. I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Poppy. Councillor Kendall.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and also thank you to Andy for work. It's a massive job. Must have seemed very daunting at times, I'm sure. Just to clarify, Chair, I know there's, if I've missed it, hold my hands up, but we talk about priorities in here, yeah? We've got 121 assets there. Obviously, you can't look at them all at once. Have you got, I know they're number 1 to 121, is that the running order that you're looking at them in, or are you going to look at certain ones first? And how is that just going to work going forward? Thank you.
Mr. Beer.
Thank you. No, they're not in any priority order in terms of numbering. The purpose of the asset categories was to try to provide a filter, as you say, to how we're going to review those. So things that we would want to look at would be those bit at lease that may be less than best if they're coming up for renewal, look at some of the commercial terms that have been agreed in the past, and some of the bigger assets as well, where sort of the greater gain is going to be. So the next, there is an action to look at, to review those, and I think the first step is to review the priority order that we want to do those with those kind of considerations, and where we can maximise the benefit of those, because you show there's little point in focusing on things of kind of little benefit, where we've got some things that could actually either generate additional income or contribute to the regeneration agenda.
And, sorry, Chair, to committee in terms of what you're looking at first and the setup? Yeah.
We can certainly do that. We will report back to committee on the actions, and yeah, certainly that'll be something that we can bring, because also there may be some decisions to be made around those assets.
I think it's fair to say it'll be added to the work plan as appropriate and needed, but beyond that, we'll go through the regeneration working group, etc., for further information for members as necessary and needed. Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, sort of continuation of Councillor Kendall's question, what does success look like? Will all the priority action plan, will everything on that list be completed by December 27? Because that's how I'm reading this. This is that priority, and therefore it should be focused and therefore should be completed by December 27. Thank you.
Mr. Bear? So
the 14 actions are the ones that are going to be completed with the 18-month period, and there is one action obviously to review, so to review as those asset kind of categories. As I say, it may not necessarily we may not have the answers to all those, but we'll have a priority order and a direction of travel for the particular groups of assets, and obviously there may be some further decisions to be made, regards to the findings of those reviews. But obviously we want to work, we work at pace. We don't want to just kind of hang around, if you like, to make sure that the portfolio is working as hard as it can.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak again. Yes, I'd like to thank the officers. I think we gave them a rather long job, and it's the first time, I think, in all the years that I've been asking for an update or some sort of paperwork which gives us an idea of our assets, that I've actually seen it listed out. I'm sure, no disrespect to the officers, I'm sure we've missed some somewhere, but that's it might be a little plot in the middle of nowhere. It's a good list, and I suppose we can look into it and go and put a description by the side of it, more than that's actually in the list as we see it. But to throw a curved ball in there, do we, at any stage, put a financial value on our assets? I've never seen it. I've seen individual items given as a value, but somewhere in our, budget or whatever, I've never seen our assets put down as a value. And we've got lots of properties here and lots of bits and pieces. So, do we get a value on it? Have we got a value on it? Or do we intend to have a value on it?
Mrs. Barnes?
So I think with regards to value, so obviously there are asset values within the accounts which would reflect the reinstatement value of those assets. Values obviously would differ depending on whether we choose to dispose of something. One of the actions is that we want to identify the cost of holding property. So we've got some clarity and visibility around not only what the portfolio is generating in terms of income, but also what it's costing us. So that will give us some important data in terms of how hard the portfolio is working. But say in terms of values, there are the book values that are reflected in the accounts, and then whatever we choose to do with particular assets, they get valued at that time, depending on what the market is like and what our proposals are to do with them. So it's not quite an exact science.
Do you have a follow-up, Councillor Parker?
Thank you. I just think that the most likely outcome is that we only put a value on it when we come to dispose of it. That's generally what happens previously. So, I mean, somebody needs to put a value on the town hall. I don't know what it is. The value on William Hunter Way or even on the Brentwood Centre. So, none of this is not available, I don't think, generally, until there is a chance to dispose of it, and then we decide what the value is. But that's just my way of looking at it. I'm not sure that's the way it actually works.
Thank you, Mrs. Barnes. Do you want to?
So just to come back on that, you're quite right. I think the purpose of the strategy and the frameworks proposed is we recognise that within the asset team's been under-resourced. We have limited data, so there's some clear actions as we need to, as Andy quite rightly said, we need to understand what our portfolio is costing us, and that would also we'd look at what things are valued at. The statement of accounts, so our balance sheet does hold values. Different categories of assets are valued differently. So I'd expect our commercial portfolio to have a commercial value to it. Our car parks, again, they would have a commercial value to it as well as land value. We would value stuff based on what the intention is to do it. So car parks, if we were to redevelop it for residential, we'd want to get a residential valuation on that rather than a car park. So, but I think one of the actions is to develop KPIs and so that the committee has oversight of the assets and that portfolio. So I acknowledge that information has probably never been out there, but we are proposing that we have some more clarity and the committee understands the portfolio, so that they can make the recommended decisions coming forward from the work that Andy and the team will do.
Thank you. Did I have any other questions? Oh, Catherine Gordon.
Thank you again. Part of my education, really. This report presents the final draft. Obviously, redrafting things is fairly inefficient, but obviously we want to get it right. If we accept this, does it, we don't have to redraft it, we just accept the report? Thank you.
That is correct.
And I will make the changes I've already on it.
There will be some typo corrections, and in turn, as Councillor Parker and Mr. Beer mentioned, if you see that asset list and you believe they're in your ward or area or something, or an asset you thought the council owned and it isn't on that list, please do flag it with us. There are some historic records and elements that are very difficult to find, and creating this list for the first time is the hardest task of all, and then maintaining it becomes a different challenge. But having a list to begin with is a huge step forward, and again, thank you to the officers for that. I do not have any further speakers, so I will move to the... Oh, Councillor Cloak, does anything? Sorry, keep forgetting, Councillor Cloak. We will now move to now vote on the recommendations set out on page 60 of the agenda. All those in favour? That motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. I would now like to reorder the agenda to take item 12, which is urgent business, before item 11, given item 11 is in the pink. Is that agreeable? Yes. There are item 12 urgent business. There are no items of urgent business. So that takes us to item 11, the Strategic Town Centre Public Realm Scheme.